Hi, my name is Mira Hirtz and we're going to have a walkthrough this exhibition Critical Zones in Search of a Common Ground. This exhibition was conceived in a collaboration between the Goethe-Institut South Asia and the ZKM, that's the Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, Germany. And this exhibition was based on the idea of the director of ZKM, Peter Weibel, and the French philosopher Bruno Latour, the latter who sadly passed away about 3 weeks ago. And this exhibition that we're in now, that is an adaptation of the original show that was presented at ZKM. And this adaptation was curated by Daria Miller, my colleague, and myself. And in this adaptation, you can see a selection of the artworks from the original show, and then it was complemented further by positions from Indian and Sri Lankan artists. Because this adaptation here is actually a touring exhibition, it starts here in the Goethe-Institut Max Müller Bhavan, Mumbai, and then this year it will go also to Colombo, to Pune, and next year to Delhi, Kolkata, and Bangalore. But we're starting here. So, what is this exhibition about? It's not easy to sum up, and the title gives us a little bit of a hint, critical zones, and I will say something about that term a little later. But first we start here with this print by Wilhelm Berghaus. In the 19th century, he was a cartographer, geographer, and publisher, and he focused a lot on thematic maps. I will say something about that as well. And this is maybe a good point where I can just try to sum up this whole project a little bit. So I would say that in this exhibition, the main question is, what is the position of the human being towards the planet Earth? What is this relationship? Because we are in a moment where this relationship is actually changing in the midst of ecological crisis. It becomes quite apparent that this planet that we speaking abstractly human beings for a long time thought is just a dead object, is actually agent, reactive, and reacts a lot to the actions of the human beings. So in this ecological crisis we are in, but also political crisis, energy crisis, we're in the situation that Bruno Latour calls the new climatic regime, which means that it's affecting globally all forms of life. What do we do now? What do we do in this moment where our relationship, our human relationship towards the Earth is somehow changing? Everything is a bit shaking. We have to reorient ourselves. This exhibition really looks at to kind of describe this relationship. How can we describe this relationship between the human beings and the Earth? What tools do we have for that? What images, what means do we have? Are they sufficient? And these questions are important to us because we need tools, we need ways to investigate this relationship, because that will then guide our political, personal, etc. decisions. So this is kind of the big view on all of this. Critical zones as a term tries to sum up all of these different questions and ideas. And to say a bit more about this term, we can have a look at this soil map, which has been done by 2 French architects and artists, Alexandre Arène and Sohail Hashmir Baba. And what we see in this soil map is actually not so easy to understand, because it is kind of an experimental new way of mapping this relationship that kind of incorporates all that I've just said. So trying to incorporate that we are living with a planet Earth that's now somehow reactive. And what we see on this round map here is a specific area of a landscape which functions as an outdoor laboratory, a so-called critical zone observatory. And this already gives us a hint that critical zone is a term that actually comes from the sciences. It comes from the earth sciences and geosciences. And Bruno Latour then took this term and kind of started to introduce it into the humanities, into the art world. And in the sciences, the term really denotes the very thin layer of the Earth. So like the skin, it's just a few kilometers thin. But only in this thin zone, the conditions are given that life can actually exist. So if you would go towards the core of the Earth very quickly, you would not have any life happening, and towards the atmosphere, it's the same case. So only in this really thin zone, you have a very, density of life present. Something we know more and more is that these life forms are interacting, dependent on each other. If you change one thing, something else will change as well. So this is where the term critical comes in. It's a critical relationship between them because it's so refined, it's so delicate. It's also very crucial. All of that so far so good, but really kind of surprised me when I learned about this term from scientists is that we, speaking again abstractly as human beings, also as scientists on this earth, kind of know so much, but we do know very little about how all these different forms of life are actually interacting, how they're really in a relationship to each other, how is all of that functioning. We do know very little about that. So that's why scientists got together a few decades ago and said, we are going to, from all the different disciplines together, focus on figuring out how is life actually working in this zone? How is it even possible? Also in order to understand the different influences on that, the human impact, etc., etc. But what do we see here? So if you want to map the critical zone, or here the critical zone observatory, so one of these laboratories in which these scientists try to figure out these different relationships of life forms, organic and inorganic matter, of course you kind of have to show a cross-section, because you have to show the different layers of the Earth and also of the atmosphere of this thin zone. But what they did here is you have a cross-section and then they took the ends and they put them together. So you end up with this ring. And they did that because they want to, or these artists here wanted to create a map in which you can see the research that the scientists are doing in this area. And they're doing a lot of research on chemicals and how they're traveling and what kind of dynamics they're traveling through this system of this landscape. And often that is actually happening in circles in which they're being put in, propelled out again. So you kind of need to show these dynamics. You need a map that can show space but also time. So this was the experiment, to do a round map, which is quite funny here because you actually here end up with the atmosphere in the middle. Then you go out to the canopy of the trees and then the layers of the earth. So it's almost like you would turn the globe inside out like a glove. And this is also being done because like that you can give more space to the soil layers. So much to the term critical zone. And we're here in this exhibition, in the beginning of the exhibition, in a chapter where a lot of different artworks are looking at how to investigate the critical zone together with scientists and what role art plays in imagining, mapping, thinking about these different scientific ways of research. And all of the exhibition is actually kind of, you could say, like a small model trying to simulate a new way of finding the relationship towards Earth, a new way of finding ways to coexist with forms of life and going through different stages, asking questions along the way. And we are going to go to another artwork that is also in this first section. This is an artwork that incorporates a lot of different forms. We have a showcase with resin objects, but we also have here a projection with a VR work. That means the audience can put on the glasses and then kind of tap into this world. Again here, these artists have been working together with scientists who are researching on a forest in Switzerland that deals with a lot of problems because of heat and droughts. What you can see here on this projection at the moment is actually the translation into visual particles of something that is actually gas particles. So it's a volatile organic matter. Because in a forest you don't only have CO2 and oxygen being transferred, but a lot of other gases that are floating around and that are actually giving us this really typical scent that you can smell when you go into a forest. And what happens is that the hotter it gets, the more of these gases are being put out. So the question here is also, does the forest become more and more atmospheric the more and more we face global warming? And from here we can kind of focus on a topic in this exhibition that then asks, okay, how do we again deal with maps, but in a little bit of a different way? How do we deal with the fact that a country depends on more than just what you can fit into the borders of its nation? So, for example, if I would talk about Germany, where this exhibition was, or the original exhibition was shown first, you can have the national borders of Germany, but if you would look at all the resources that Germany depends on, it would be much, much bigger and have a very different form. So you kind of could talk about something that's called here ghost acreages. So these areas that are ghostly somehow also actually present and impacting our world very much. And this work here by Uriel Orlov is a really nice example of this topic. He looks a lot at plants, seeds, crops, and how they have been traveling throughout history, throughout different continents, and brings, in this work here especially, together a moment of industrialization in France and colonial history, namely colonial agriculture. And we kind of start all of this in the suburbs of Paris in the 19th century, on Aubervilliers, where there was a lot of farming going on, and then industrialization happened. So these farming lands had to leave in favor of factories. So what happened at the same time is that France then started to produce and ship out crops and seeds to their colonies to West Africa, for example to Senegal, started to grow it there, started to harvest it, and then bring it back to France. So what also started is that they started to bring seeds and crops from South America, brought them to testing gardens in France or in Paris, and that was done in special boxes. So you can see them here in this photograph, but also these boxes that are built here are actually referencing them. Again, they were tested, they were then brought to the Senegal, harvested and brought back. So it was a whole journey of crops, but it always kind of ended up in France. And what this work here also does is in a really non-linear manner, horizontal manner as well, looking into these different archival materials, but also looking into what's presently happening. So for example, looking at farmers in Senegal today, at markets where things are being distributed. Because after the independence of the colonies, actually, we still have a lot of companies from Europe going to the former colonies, producing there, bringing the food back to Europe, and there it's being sold in a very cheap way. So in a way, these things might go on, and this is what this work looks at: present, past, possible future. For this next topic of the exhibition, we kind of zoom out and in at the same time. And this section here, you would have a little bit of an archival table with videos and books where you can sit and read. And this section focuses on the thesis of Gaia. That's something that was formulated by the biologist Lynn Margulis, who you can see here with a microscope, and James Lovelock, physicist. And just to say it very shortly, the Gaia theory says that both organic matter, so life forms, have influenced inorganic matter, but also inorganic matter forms life. That maybe sounds quite obvious right now, but it's actually something that has been debated for a very long time, because for a long time it was thought in biology, for example, that actually inorganic matter is formed by inorganic matter. So rock would be formed by wind and water. And then that's formed, and then the life form comes and kind of has to adapt to that. But especially Lynn Margulis, with her research on bacteria and microbes, showed that actually there are also bacteria who are forming inorganic matter. For example, without bacteria, we would not have the oxygen atmosphere that we have today. So there's a back and forth between these two things, and so much that sometimes we can't even separate them. And this section here really then focuses on these like microbes, on this like forms where Lynn Margulis likes to say they are actually ruling the planet, not the human being, but they are ruling the planet. So here we are in a moment questioning what evolution is, questioning how, again, organic and inorganic matter interacts with each other, and questioning what the role of the human being in all of this actually is. And we stay with this topic for the work of Sonia Mehra-Chawla, who, in this work here, The Universe in Details and BioShield, which is over here, it's both a part of the series Critical Membrane, is focusing on the ecosystem of mangroves, which are mostly growing at coastal areas. And they're kind of working as a threshold, as a protective barrier between the sea and the land. So they're quite important, but also endangered and destroyed very much. What she looks into here is the different microbes that you can find in these ecosystems. And they're responsible for also keeping it healthy. And you can actually see, if you look at the diversity of the microbes, you can kind of tell how healthy the ecosystem also is. And she, again, has been working together here with a research foundation in Chennai, who then have been cultivating these different samples that she has been collecting and photographing them. And this foundation also looks into traditional fishing techniques and how they are also helping the mangrove ecosystem to become healthy again or maintain them, because in these local fishing techniques you often have a lot of small canals in these ecosystems that are actually keeping the water flowing and moving in a good way. So what's kind of interesting, and we might see that a bit in this video here that kind of pulls us a bit inwards, is that what we are meeting again and again this exhibition is kind of this impetus to, rather than trying to look at the Earth from the outside, you know, this image when we see the globe after we have gone into the universe and we kind of turn around and look back. Instead of that, where we as the human being take ourselves out, we are actually trying to go deeper in. We're trying to understand that we are part of this, and there's no moment we can step out. And in this movement of going in, we might actually arrive somewhere where we didn't thought we would arrive, and arrive in a moment where we see that, for example, a traditional fishing technique is much better than the unsustainable ones. So this is very much core to this exhibition. And then we move on to another topic of this exhibition, and we're looking at this large projection here by Forensic Architecture. And this part here focuses also a lot on, again, the question of borders in a little bit of a different way, really asking what roles do borders of countries play in the light of all of this that we are discussing. Forensic Architecture is a quite interesting group because they're a collective of architects, as the name says, but also scientists, artists, lawyers, different people working together who have been focusing on moments where human rights are somehow in danger. And cloud studies here takes its name also a bit from, cloud studies is actually something that's rather have been done in painting. So painters would study clouds because it's not easy to paint them and the movement and dynamics. But here it's not so much about the aesthetics of them, but rather looking at different gases. So not only clouds of water, but different gases. For example, pesticides, because pesticides can be allowed in one country, not in the neighboring country. But if the wind comes and takes the cloud of the pesticides over to the other country, it doesn't really matter. So in the light of clouds and things traveling, what role, again, do the borders of countries play? So this is something that is being explained here in a very nice way about different kinds of gases. The work here by Edith Morales is kind of fitting in a lot of these different topics. She, as you can see behind me here, she is working with maize, corn seeds, and she has been focusing on a type of corn called otolon, which is able to fertilize itself. And it does that because it has aerial roots, and then there's a gel, and in this gel bacteria are growing, and these bacteria can then take nitrogen from the air. And that's possible. That's kind of a joint effort of indigenous communities in Mexico who have been cultivating them, and of course also the plant itself. So it's a really joint effort here. What happened then is that a few years ago, some industries learned about this and then started to produce, or try to produce at least, bio-fertilizers instead of synthetic ones, which would be very harmful. So this is actually a nice direction, but then Edith Morales is also asking here, what role do then the indigenous community play who actually helped to produce this kind of corn seed or maize? Are they getting any benefits? Are they getting any benefits, especially when the biofertilizers will maybe help to do something like mass production? So how are these laws functioning? What role does the history play? So there's a lot of topics that are coming up here. And these topics are also coming up a lot in these kind of last topic of this exhibition, which is very much about becoming terrestrial, is the title of that. So Bruno Latour says becoming terrestrial and means by that, how can we kind of really land in this critical zone? So if all this exhibition is about investigating the critical zone, navigating it, getting to know life again, that's anew, then the question is, how can we really land in it? How can we find new ways of coexistence? And another artist working with that is Ravi Agarwal, who has also been working a lot together already with the Goethe-Institut Mumbai. And in his banners here, we can see his, a part of his long-term project that he has been doing about indigenous, again, fishing communities in the Bay of Bengal, who are threatened by many different things, be it unsustainable fishing methods, be it boats with a larger engine so that they actually have too much competition. And Ravi Agarwal has really done this long research period in order to really understand how, for them, for these communities, livelihood, labor, life, all of that is mixed. Their life, the landscape, all of that belongs together. You can't really separate it. But now they're kind of losing all of it in a way. What we can also see is that he works a lot together with putting images and text, marrying them. The text is often inspired by Sangam poetry, so that's 300 BC poetry that's already focusing on this coexistence of human being, sea, landscape. And maybe as a last artist, over here we see this table with Stefan Valley-Botero's work or installation. He has done a quite extensive work at ZKM, so at the original exhibition in Germany, where he was responsible for looking at the footprint of this exhibition. So I think it's quite important that you can't really do this kind of exhibition without then also looking into what's the impact of that. But instead of trying to do something that a lot of companies are then doing, which is greenwashing, so you calculate your footprint and then you calculate how many trees you have to plant, he rather really looked into what could a museum's role be in all of this that we've been talking about, and did a whole work on the perma-circular museum. So kind of extending the task of the museum, which is preserving objects or artifacts or artworks, to preserving the local ecosystem as well. And he proposed to the ZKM to take care of an orchard for a while, which they did, and were giving water, cutting the trees, harvesting the apples, and here you can see some of that work that he did. So this was a quick walk through this exhibition, Critical Zones in Search of a Common Ground. I want to say a huge thank you to the team of the Goethe-Institut Mumbai, the team of the Goethe-Instituts in general, the team of the ZKM, and also again to Bruno Latour, to whom this exhibition tour is also dedicated, who, as I said in the beginning, sadly passed away 3 weeks ago. And without his ideas and his curiosity also, all of this would not have been possible. So thank you.